My Life, by Bill Clinton. Introduction. Imagine you're a young boy, barely a teenager. It's late at night, and from behind your parents' closed bedroom door, you hear the sounds of shouting. Then, a thud. The shouting turns to screams. Your little brother, only 4 years old, is terrified. You've lived with this secret, this quiet terror, your whole life. The man in that room is your stepfather, a man you call Daddy, a man who can be kind and funny, but who carries a darkness inside him, a darkness that comes out when he drinks. Tonight, something snaps. You can't stand it anymore. You run to your room, grab the heaviest thing you can find, a golf club, and you throw open their door. Your mother is on the floor. He's standing over her. And in that moment, you find a voice you didn't know you had. You tell him to stop. You tell him that if he ever touches her again, you will use that club on him. He freezes, looks at you, and then, the rage just deflates. He sits down, broken. And you, the boy with the golf club, have just learned one of life's hardest lessons. Sometimes, you have to stand up to the people you love to protect the people you love even more. That boy was Bill Clinton. And how he went from that broken home in Hot Springs, Arkansas, to the Oval Office is one of the most extraordinary stories in American history. Today, we're diving into his massive autobiography, My Life. It's a book that sold millions of copies, not just because it's the story of a president, but because it's a deeply human story about ambition, failure, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of a second chance. By the end of our journey today, you will understand the powerful, often painful forces that shape this remarkable leader. You'll discover the secret to his uncanny ability to connect with people, his almost superhuman capacity to endure political attacks, and the profound lessons he learned about leadership, forgiveness, and what it truly means to build a life of purpose. This isn't just a summary of a book, it's a masterclass in turning hardship into strength. Let's begin. Book summary. The story of Bill Clinton begins, in many ways, before he was even born. It begins on a dark, rainy night on a Missouri highway in 1946. A young man named William Jefferson Blythe, Jr. is driving from Chicago back to his pregnant wife in Hope, Arkansas. A tire blows, the car flips, and he's thrown into a drainage ditch. He drowns, just 28 years old, 3 months before his son is born. That son, named William Jefferson Blythe III, would grow up with a ghost for a father. Clinton writes that this loss created a profound sense of his own mortality from a very young age. He felt he had to live for two people, to make up for the life his father never had. This urgency, this feeling that time was always running out, would become a driving force for the rest of his life. He was always in a hurry, always pushing toward the next big challenge, even when he wasn't sure what it was. He was born in a small town called Hope, Arkansas, and that name would become a central metaphor for his entire political career. But his early life was far from a simple, hopeful story. His widowed mother, Virginia, was a vibrant, beautiful woman who loved life, horse racing, and a good time. To support her new son, she went to New Orleans to become a nurse anesthetist, leaving young Bill in the care of her parents for the first few years of his life. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because his grandparents, Edith and Eldridge Cassidy, were two of the most powerful and contradictory influences on him. His grandmother, whom he called Mama, was a force of nature. She was bright, intense, and determined that her grandson would be smart, well-fed, and clean. She would tack playing cards to his high chair to teach him numbers while he ate. She read to him from the World Book Encyclopedia until he could read them himself. She stuffed him with food, believing a fat baby was a healthy baby. These early lessons stuck with him. They explain his love of reading, his lifelong battle with his weight, and his affinity for card games. But it was his grandfather, Eldridge Cassidy, or Pawpaw, who was the first great male role model in his life. Pawpaw was a kind, gentle man who, in a completely segregated South, treated everyone with dignity. He ran a small grocery store in a predominantly black neighborhood. Young Bill would spend hours there, watching his grandfather interact with his customers. He saw black people and white people, but because his grandfather treated them all the same, asking about their families, extending them credit when they were broke, the young boy didn't learn about prejudice. He just saw people. He learned that everyone had a story, a lesson that would become the bedrock of his political genius. His grandfather, Clinton writes, taught him to look up to people others look down on, because we're not so different after all. This simple lesson, learned in a small country store, was more profound than any political science class he would ever take. It was the beginning of his uncanny ability to connect with people from all walks of life, to make them feel seen and heard. But this idyllic world of his grandparents' house was soon shattered. When his mother returned from New Orleans, she married a man named Roger Clinton, a handsome, fun-loving car dealer who was also a heavy drinker and an abusive alcoholic. The family moved to Hot Springs, a town known as Sin City for its illegal gambling operations, and young Bill, who soon took his stepfather's last name, was plunged into what he calls his parallel lives. On the outside, he was a model student. He was bright, popular, and a talented saxophone player who dreamed of becoming a professional musician. He was a leader in school clubs and his church youth group. He was the classic all-American boy, full of promise and ambition. But inside, at home, he was living a secret life filled with fear, uncertainty, and the constant threat of violence. Roger Clinton's drinking led to explosive, terrifying rages. There was the night his stepfather fired a gun in the house during an argument with his mother, the bullet lodging in the wall between where she and a young Bill were standing. And then, the confrontation I mentioned at the beginning, when at 14, he finally stood up to his stepfather with a golf club, telling him never to lay a hand on his mother again. Living this double life, Clinton writes, taught him how to wall off pain, to put on a game face no matter what was happening inside. It's a coping mechanism he says he struggled with his entire life. Every morning, he watched his mother put on her makeup, draw on her eyebrows, and face the world with a bright smile, no matter how bruised her heart, or her body, was from the night before. From her, he learned about resilience, about the simple, profound courage of just getting up and going on. This constant tension between his public ambition and his private pain defined his youth. He was always searching for a way to reconcile these two worlds. He found an outlet in music, practicing the saxophone for hours on end until his lips were sore. He found another in politics. In 1963, at the age of 16, he was chosen to be a delegate to Boys Nation, a program for young leaders in Washington, D.C. There, in the Rose Garden of the White House, he shook the hand of President John F. Kennedy. A photograph captured the moment, a young, wide-eyed Bill Clinton reaching out, his face beaming, as he touches the hand of the leader of the free world. He writes that this moment wasn't necessarily the instant he decided to become president, but it was the moment the idea became real, tangible. It showed him that a boy from a small, troubled town in Arkansas could actually reach the pinnacle of power. It solidified his belief that public service was the highest calling. His journey continued at Georgetown University, where he dove into the world of politics and ideas, all while the Vietnam War raged in the background. This was another period of intense internal conflict for him. He worked on the staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Senator J. William Fulbright, an early and powerful critic of the war. Clinton had access to classified information that convinced him the government was misleading the American people about the conflict. He was against the war, but he was also the son of a World War II veteran and respected the military. When he became eligible for the draft, he was tormented by the choice before him. He didn't want to go fight in a war he believed was wrong, but he also didn't want to be a draft dodger. He describes this period as one of the most agonizing of his life, culminating in a now famous letter he wrote to the head of the ROTC program at the University of Arkansas, thanking him for saving him from the draft but explaining his loathing of the military and the war. In the end, a high number in the draft lottery, 311, resolved the issue for him. He would not be called to serve. But the guilt and the political fallout from that decision would follow him for the rest of his career. After Georgetown, he won a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford University. And it was after his time in England, at Yale Law School, that the next pivotal chapter of his life began. One day in the law library, he noticed a young woman with thick glasses and a powerful, self-possessed air. He writes that he was so struck by her that he followed her out of class, wanting to introduce himself, but lost his nerve. A few days later, he was talking to a friend in the library when he saw her again, this time at the far end of the long room. She was staring at him. He stared back. After a few moments, she closed her book, walked the entire length of the library, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "If you're going to keep staring at me, and I'm going to keep staring back, we ought to at least know each other's names. Mine's Hillary Rodham. What's yours?" He was so stunned, he couldn't speak. That moment was the beginning of the most important partnership of his life. He writes that he was drawn to Hillary not just for her looks and her powerful presence, but for her mind. She was, he felt, the most talented and intelligent person of his generation. Their relationship was a fusion of love, intellectual sparring, and shared ambition. He knew he wanted to spend his life with her. But he had a difficult choice to make. After law school, he had a prestigious job lined up managing the national campaign for presidential candidate George McGovern in Texas. It was a huge opportunity for a young, aspiring politician. But Hillary had a summer job in California. He was terrified that if they spent the summer apart, he would lose her. So he made a decision that baffled his political friends. He turned down the campaign job and followed Hillary to California. Your life, he reflects, is shaped by the opportunities you turn down as well as by those you seize. For him, choosing Hillary over a political stepping stone was one of the best decisions he ever made. After that summer, he convinced her to come back with him to Arkansas, where he began teaching at the University of Arkansas Law School. In 1974, at just 28 years old, he ran for Congress against a popular incumbent Republican. Everyone told him it was a suicide mission. He lost, but by such a narrow margin that he became an instant political star in Arkansas. 2 years later, he was elected Attorney General. And just 2 years after that, in 1978, at the age of 32, he was elected governor of Arkansas, the youngest governor in the country. His first term was a whirlwind of progressive reforms. He was still in a hurry, still trying to live up to that sense of destiny that had been with him since childhood. He reformed the state's education system, improved its roads, and modernized its government. But he did it all too fast. He alienated powerful interest groups, from the timber companies to the utilities. And he made a critical political mistake. He signed into law a large increase in the fee for car tags, which angered working-class Arkansans who felt betrayed. In 1980, after just one term, he was defeated for re-election. He became the youngest ex-governor in American history. It was a humiliating, crushing blow. He writes that he spent weeks in a funk, lying on the floor of his house, trying to figure out what went wrong. He finally realized that he had been so focused on policy that he had forgotten about people. He had stopped listening. It was a painful lesson, but one he says he never forgot. He learned that you can have good policy without good politics, but you can't have good government without both. That loss, he believes, was what ultimately made it possible for him to become president. It taught him humility, patience, and the importance of staying connected to the people he served. In 1982, he ran again, asking the people of Arkansas for a second chance. He famously went on television and admitted his mistakes, saying, "My daddy never had to whip me twice for the same thing." He won, and went on to serve as governor for 10 more years, rebuilding his political career and honing the skills that would take him to the national stage. The 1992 presidential campaign was the ultimate test of everything he had learned. He entered the race as a long shot, the governor of a small southern state. And right away, he was hit with a barrage of attacks on his character, stories about his avoidance of the draft and an alleged 12-year affair with a woman named Jennifer Flowers. His campaign nearly collapsed in New Hampshire. The press declared him dead. But he refused to quit. He and Hillary went on the TV show 60 Minutes to confront the allegations. He admitted he had caused pain in his marriage, a coded but clear admission of imperfection. The public, it turned out, was more forgiving than the political pundits. He didn't win New Hampshire, but he came in a strong second, declaring himself the comeback kid. That resilience became the hallmark of his campaign. He created a war room in Little Rock, a new model of rapid response politics that never let an attack go unanswered. He connected with voters on a personal level in town hall meetings. And he hammered home a simple, powerful message that James Carville, his strategist, had taped to the wall: the economy, stupid. He promised a new covenant based on opportunity, responsibility, and community, and he presented himself as a new kind of Democrat, one who was pro-growth, tough on crime, and committed to welfare reform. After winning the presidency, he faced a series of monumental challenges. His first 2 years were a mix of stunning successes and bruising defeats. He passed a landmark economic plan that would eventually lead to a balanced budget and the longest period of prosperity in American history. He did it by just one vote in both the House and the Senate, without a single Republican vote. He passed the Brady Bill, requiring a waiting period for handgun purchases, and the Family and Medical Leave Act. But he also stumbled. His attempt to lift the ban on gays in the military was met with fierce opposition, forcing him into the compromise of don't ask, don't tell. And his ambitious plan for universal health care, led by Hillary, collapsed under the weight of a massive, well-funded opposition campaign from the insurance industry. The political fallout was severe. In 1994, the Democrats lost control of Congress for the first time in 40 years. Newt Gingrich and his contract with America promised a conservative revolution. The media once again wrote Clinton off as a failed, irrelevant president. But just as he had in 1980, Clinton learned from his defeat. He realized he had tried to do too much, too fast, again. He repositioned himself in the center, fighting the Republicans on their most extreme budget cuts, especially to Medicare, Medicaid, and education, but finding common ground where he could. The climax of this battle was the government shutdown of late 1995. Gingrich and the Republicans shut down the federal government, believing Clinton would cave to their demands. But he held firm. He argued that their budget was extreme and would hurt ordinary Americans. In this high-stakes game of political chicken, Gingrich blinked. The public sided with the president, and Clinton's political comeback was complete. He went on to win a resounding re-election in 1996. His second term was a period of remarkable peace and prosperity. The economy boomed, creating over 22 million new jobs. The budget was balanced for the first time in a generation, and the nation enjoyed its first surplus. He passed welfare reform, expanded health insurance for children, and continued his fight to put 100,000 more police on the streets, leading to a dramatic drop in crime. On the world stage, he was a relentless peacemaker. He helped broker the Dayton Accords, which ended the brutal war in Bosnia. He was a central figure in the long, difficult negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians, culminating in the historic handshake between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn. He played a key role in the Good Friday Agreement, which brought an end to decades of violence in Northern Ireland. He expanded NATO to include former Warsaw Pact nations and built a strong partnership with a democratic Russia under Boris Yeltsin. But this period of public triumph was shadowed by another personal crisis. The parallel lives he had struggled with for so long collided in the most public and painful way imaginable. The Whitewater investigation, which began as a look into a failed land deal from the 1970s, morphed into a sprawling, multi-million-dollar inquiry led by independent counsel Kenneth Starr. Starr's investigation found no wrongdoing by the Clintons in Whitewater, but it did uncover Clinton's inappropriate relationship with a young White House intern, Monica Lewinsky. When confronted with the affair in a deposition for the Paula Jones sexual harassment lawsuit, Clinton denied it. This denial led to charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, and ultimately, to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. He writes about this period with deep shame and regret. He says what he did was immoral, foolish, and indefensible. He lied to his wife, his daughter, his staff, and the American people. He admits he was trying to protect himself and his family, but he takes full responsibility for his actions. The impeachment trial in the Senate was a surreal, agonizing ordeal. But in the end, he was acquitted. The public, while condemning his personal conduct, did not believe his actions rose to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors required for removal from office. They wanted their president to be punished, but they didn't want him to be destroyed. He spent the last 2 years of his presidency working to repair the damage, both to his family and to the country. He worked on his marriage, and writes with profound love and gratitude for Hillary's strength and forgiveness. He continued to work for peace in the Middle East, coming agonizingly close to a final agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians at Camp David. And he continued to fight for his domestic agenda, securing the largest budget in history for education and passing a landmark bill to bring trade and investment to Africa and the Caribbean. As his presidency drew to a close, he reflects on his long, improbable journey. He writes that he leaves office more idealistic and full of hope than the day he arrived. He believes he has helped America navigate the transition into a new, globalized world, a world of both incredible opportunity and new dangers like terrorism. Commentary. So, what do we take from a life so full of incredible highs and devastating lows? I think the most powerful lesson in my life is about the nature of failure. For Bill Clinton, failure was never the end of the story. It was a catalyst. His defeat in 1980 wasn't just a political loss, it was a profound education in humility. It taught him to listen, to connect, and to never again take the trust of the people for granted. The failure of healthcare in 1994 forced him to find a new way to govern, a third way that sought to bridge the bitter partisan divide. And his personal failings, which led to the national trauma of impeachment, forced him to confront the deepest parts of himself, to finally merge those parallel lives that had haunted him since childhood. This book is a testament to the idea that you are not defined by your mistakes, but by how you respond to them. It's a story about getting back up, again and again and again. For a young person, just starting out, that's a lesson worth more than gold. You are going to fail. You are going to make mistakes, both public and private. The question is, what will you do then? Will you let it break you, or will you let it teach you? There's another powerful lesson here, one that goes back to his grandfather's grocery store. Clinton's political genius was rooted in a simple, profound belief: everyone has a story. He didn't just see voters, he saw people, with their own hopes, fears, and dreams. He understood that politics, at its best, is about giving people a chance to have a better story. That's a lesson that applies far beyond politics. In your own life, Whether you're leading a company, a classroom, or just your own family, taking the time to know and honor the stories of the people around you is the surest path to connection and success. So, how can you apply these ideas to your own life, right now? First, do what a young Bill Clinton did and make your own A-list. What are your most important long-term goals? What do you want your life to stand for? Write them down. Look at them often. It will give you a North Star to guide you through the inevitable storms. Second, embrace your setbacks. When you lose a game, fail a test, or fall short of a goal, don't just move on. Ask yourself, what did I learn? How can I be better next time? Every failure is a lesson, but only if you're willing to be a student. And finally, start listening. Really listen. The next time you're talking to someone, a classmate, a teacher, a family member, ask them about their story. Ask them what they care about, what they're afraid of, what they hope for. You'll be amazed at what you learn, and at the connections you can build. That was a summary of my life by Bill Clinton. We've certainly hit the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This book is more than a political memoir. It's a sprawling, messy, and deeply human story about what it means to lead, to fail, and to find redemption. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your country, and your own capacity for resilience. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to explore the great books on the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.